and prevent any further restrictions or lockdowns from going ahead.
Time for my political panel now. Liberal MP Tim Wilson and Labor MP Anne Ali join me. Welcome to both of you in person.
Hey, Patricia.
Goodness, this is so
Are we distancing enough?
Yes, we are.
I think we're okay.
As long as Tim and I are distanced enough, because it might get heated.
Let's start with talking about some of the projections in this budget, starting with you, Tim Wilson. We've had really mixed messages from the government about whether everyone will be vaccinated by the end of the year. Should everyone be guaranteed vaccination done and dusted by the end of the year?
What we've said is we have the supply necessary that every Australian who wishes to be vaccinated by the end of the year will be in a position to do so. And of course, we want as many Australians to vaccinate as possible. I'll be getting a vaccination. I hope you two will as well, and I hope all the viewers will as well, because it's the best way that we can get back to a road where we're able to open up, not just as domestically, protect ourselves against the threat of the virus, but also progressively our international borders. But that requires people to be vaccinated. We've had 77,000 nearly in the past 24 hours, which shows you that, yes, there's been a build-up, but it's now moving apace. Around 2.8 million Australians have been vaccinated, and that's a huge success, but there's more to do.
What do you make of the government's projections for when it will get this job done?
Well, which projections are there? I mean, you had Josh Frydenberg saying that the projections, in fact, the budget was predicated on the assumption that everybody would be vaccinated, have both vaccinations by the end of the year. And then you had the Prime Minister say something entirely different. And then you had the Minister for Health say something entirely different. So which is it? You know, what are the projections and what are the assumptions that the budget is based on around the vaccine rollout? I have people coming into my office every day saying, I don't know when I'm getting the vaccine, I don't know, I've been told that there are no vaccines available for me. So, you know, you can talk all you like about how many people have been vaccinated, but Tim, your government promised that there would be 4 million people vaccinated by the end of March, and they're not. So I don't know how on earth you can assume that you're going to have all of Australia vaccinated by the end of the year.
Sorry, just for clarity, what we've said is there's available vaccines for every Australian by the end of the year to be able to do so. Now, you know, and I know, Anne, as you do, Patricia, that there'll be some people who've made a choice not to get vaccinated. And now, while I'll obviously not share their view, as that I'll get vaccinated, we have to respect the fact that people have the freedom to choose to decide what to put in their body.
OK, so the international borders don't open, according, again, to the budget estimates, until the middle of next year. Are you satisfied with that time frame? Because business is bristling.
I've said consistently I'd like to see international borders open as soon as it's safe to do so, but the reality...
Well, if we're all vaccinated by the end of the year, why isn't it safe to do so immediately?
Well, firstly, we know that there are other variants of the virus out there. We don't know whether we've had wave 1, 2 or 3 or 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. We've seen variants and mutations, and so we're making conservative estimates based on what we understand are known risks. We've seen what's happened recently in India. We've seen what's happened potentially in other countries like Indonesia and Canada, where there have been disastrous health consequences for younger people. Will make prudent, responsible decisions to protect the Australian community, while absolutely with the ambition to try and get us back to normal as quickly as possible.
Labor's been critical of this. Do you think that the international border should be opening earlier?
Well, let's talk about what's predictable and what's not predictable in this scenario, okay? So the things that we do have control over, or that we should have control over, are quarantine and the vaccine rollout. Now, no mention of quarantine in the budget. If you were to listen to Josh Frydenberg's speech last night, you would think that the first rule of quarantine is to not talk about quarantine. So you have control over quarantine, you have control over the vaccine rollout. They're the two things that you can control. They are also the two things that will determine whether or not we can open up the international borders sooner rather than later. We've got a ton of industries who are reliant on those borders being open. Universities, tourism, business. I'd like to see them open as soon as it's possibly safe to do so. And I understand we live in an unpredictable world. I understand every point you make about the unpredictability of the COVID pandemic. However, there are points that we can and should be able to take control over and give Australians some certainty on.
Okay, so what's your date?
My date for what?
You said you want to open them up and you said certainty, so what's the date?
As soon as you can vaccinate everyone and as soon as you can put in Commonwealth quarantine. But you guys have no plan to do any of that.
Okay, so let me ask a specific question.
That's absurd.
Well, let me ask the specific question. There's a Victorian proposal. Scott Morrison says, you know, that it's...
Considering in good faith.
Yeah, and that it's a well-developed proposal. He's actually been quite complimentary about the details. philosophically, rather than, because I'm not saying that you've gone through the details, you're an epidemiologist, but philosophically, would you like the Commonwealth Government to fund such a facility?
Well, I'd like to see quarantine facilities that actually provide the pathways for Australians to return. That's why we've seen the doubling of the Howard Springs facility, and I haven't seen the proposals you outlined.
But you're a Victorian MP. Would you like to see it funded?
Well, this facility, or any facility, would be for the whole of Australia, not just for Victorians. But of course, I'm absolutely open to these prospects, and I think the opportunity to see facilities to get more Australians who haven't been able to return home, and of course we don't know how long we're going to live with this scenario, so if people need to depart and return and provide a pathway, then I'm absolutely open to it.
Yeah, so you think it's a good idea that the Commonwealth get involved with funding these alternative approaches like Howard Springs in other places?
Well, as I said, we've already funded and supported the expansion of Howard Springs.
Other than, I did say.
No, I know, and we've already done that, which shows absolutely there's a clarity there and an objective to do this, and if there are good proposals on the table, that's why the Prime Minister said he'll not only consider it in good faith, but as you said, he's been very, very complimentary, but it'll come down to the detail and making sure it works, because there's no point.
Should it have happened in the budget?
Yes.
Well, there's been allocated funding for lots of different things in the budget, but actually the decision to invest in building a facility should be based on the merits of the proposal and the capacity to keep Australians safe. The dollar figures, considering the circumstance we face, I think are actually largely immaterial. It's about the merit of the proposal.
Okay. Should we also not consider the need for the proposal? I mean, you know what Australia does really well? Australia does rapid building really, really well. We have got some of the best rapid building technologies in the world. You know why? Because we build dongas and we build mine sites.
Yes.
We could have constructed quarantine facilities that could have brought back Australians and could have safely housed Australians.
But as you and I both know, that's a rather simplistic answer, because you need things like workforces, access to airports, access to facilities.
If you wanted to do it, you would have done it.
So that's one of the reasons why we've actually used the hotel quarantine system, because the advice has been that with the workforce, with the capacity, with things like kitchens, access to doctors, medical advice and medical support officers, the hotel quarantine system has been important. We've been building and expanding up the Howard Springs facility, and the potential to build up more facilities comes with that.
Okay, final question before we wrap up, just on spending. Do you see this as a Labor-light budget?
They wish. This is how I see the budget. You know, when you go shopping with your kids and you let them fill the trolley, and then at the end you end up paying $100 for sweets and lollies, but nothing to sustain you for the week. That's how I see this budget. It's a budget of sweetness and a budget of lollies, but there is no real reform. There's nothing to really sustain. It's a budget that's predicated on a whole lot of assumptions that may or may not happen. And then there's the centrepiece of low wage growth and wage stagnation. That's how I see this budget. Is it Labor light? They wish. No.
Is it Labor light, and are you concerned about the high levels of debt?
Well, I've always been somebody who's fiscally prudent, and I absolutely want to see us get to a position where we return and are able to pay down debt. That will always be my objective in terms of balancing our budgets into the future. But you're deluded if you think it's anything other than a pandemic budget focused on what we need to do to support families and harden.
But it's baked in. But it's some of it. This is baked in long-term funding, aged care, mental health. So you say it's a pandemic budget, but it's not stimulatory. These are for essential services.
No, there are multiple parts to the budget. There is the pandemic component, which is supporting people through this period. There's obviously packages and support packages, particularly addressing gender inequity in our society. And then there are structural funding for things like aged care, because one of the benefits of having a strong economy, Patricia, is you can actually fund these services. One of the reasons why it's definitely not a Labor budget is because Labor has a long and very successful tradition of trashing the economy, so they can make commitments of the financial commitments that they then can't meet through revenue.
Big claim that I know you want to contest, but I'm out of time.
I won't take
but
up
I'm
more
aware
of
that
your time.
you don't think Labor trashes the economy.
No,
you do.
absolutely.
I think most people
I'll
know
let Tim
how
dig
you
his
both
own
line
grave.
up on that. Thank you to both of you. Nice to see you in person.
Thanks,
Liberal
Becky.
MP Tim Wilson and Labor MP Anne Ali there.